Are you a seven-figure practice owner that wants to do more without burning out? Join us for the Seven-Figure Practice Retreat, a luxury mastermind where high-level practice owners step away from the day-to-day to build systems, strategy, and freedom in the Dominican Republic. This February, spots are limited, so apply now, and our sponsors are covering 95% of the cost over at practiceofthepractice.com/7. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/7. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1269. Welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I am Joe Sanok, your host, where we help you build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. We are so excited to have you here today, hanging out with us. Now, back in May of 2025, we put on the Group Practice Conference. And at this conference, I had this dream of putting on a conference that was unlike any other. I wanted the feeling to be like connections, that people had time to meet each other. I always hated conferences where the parts that I love the most, probably getting dinner with new people or having drinks at the end of the evening, that part was so small in the calendar. And I spent most of my time just running between breakout sessions and keynotes and all of that. And the other side of it was oftentimes it felt like I would be in a session and it'd be a 90-minute session. And I really only got about 10 to 20 minutes worth of content. There's a lot of fluff in there. It just felt like get to the point. And so for what we decided to do with the Group Practice Conference was we decided that we would have 20-minute sessions on the main stage, all of our keynotes, 20 minutes, and that we would have ample time for breakout sessions, and to have time to dig in, to talk about group practice, to get to know people, and to encourage people that if they're having a great conversation, keep that going. You don't have to come back in. Continue those conversations going. And so we found that the folks that came to the Group Practice Conference in May had such a great time. They felt emotionally connected to other group practice owners. And it was just such a great event that we've tripled the size for May of 2026. We're going to be over at Northwestern Michigan College, right on their campus. And we're partnering with both Headway and the Student Life Department to put this on. And our main stage is going to be where the actual TED Talks of Traverse City take place. And then all of our discussions and our kind of digging deeper sessions are going to be throughout an art gallery. It's going to be just such a fun, unique event that we're super excited about. And lots of you weren't able to make the Group Practice Conference in 2025. And so we want to give you just a little glimpse into that. So we're going to be doing a series every week for a while throughout the end of the year, where those 20-minute main stage sessions, we're going to be playing those for you. We want you to be able to learn from all of our speakers that we had, and we want you to get excited for the Group Practice Conference in May 2026. So we want you to get excited for this over at grouppracticeconference.com. That's where you can be on the waiting list so that when tickets go live on Black Friday through Cyber Monday, you can grab your ticket. We want you to get those discounts that we have. We want you to get any of those kind of lowest priced tickets. We know they're going to sell out fast. All of our sponsors have committed to sending emails to their list. And, Headway alone, who is our co-host of this, along with the Student Life Department over at NMC, has 60,000 people on their email list that are part of Headway. So we expect the 300 or so tickets that we're offering to go quickly. So if this is something that you're interested in coming to Traverse City, we want to make sure you're on that wait list and ready to go on Black Friday so that you can get your ticket. We know they're going to go quickly. So head on over to grouppracticeconference.com and you can watch all the different things going on there and get on the wait list so that when that goes live, you get first access. So let's dive into this episode with some of our speakers from the Group Practice Conference in May 2025. Andrew is one of our consultants here with Practice the Practice. He was in our membership communities, and now he is one of the leaders of the Group Practice Launch Program. He's also our resident master with W2s and HR things. Give it up for Andrew.
I don't know about master. So It's so I guess I kind of became the W2 expert. In my hubris, I was like, let me go get another certification. And so decided to become a certified professional through the Society of HR Management, which was a interesting journey about how different that world works ethically, philosophically, all that versus us from there. So I guess at some point slides will pop in whenever. Anyway, just right now we're just doing backstory. So got an HR certification, realized the philosophy around it's very different. This was also kind of ahead of some rule changes last year about classification for employees. And thinking back to when Joe and I got together, and going to the Killing It Camp conference a couple years ago, several people there were just saying, you have employees. That's what you have as practice owners. We don't really have 1099s. And we're going to kind of walk through why you have employees if you didn't already know, and why the 1099 model is really not where you want to be long term. So Nicole and I were just talking about this, and she's a little freaked out with the number of people there. So when I started group practice just over 3 years ago, hired my really good friend, Justina. I was like, you're going to be my unicorn, because we were already really good friends. And I was like, priority is our relationship. We still have a fantastic relationship years later through all of our like growth and other things like that. And did the thing that everybody was doing at the time, which was start 1099. And, that's what everybody was doing. About a year later, people were shifting over to W2s. Some of my colleagues in Asheville, actually the two that are here, they started originally W2, but most of the rest of us started under a 1099 model and then had to transition. And one of the things about this is, if you start 1099 to transition over to W2, for those of you that haven't gotten started yet, you're going to do the same thing twice. So you're going to go through the entire conversation about compensation, the structure, everything else. And then after you have 2 or 3 people in your practice, and maybe up to 40, you're going to realize, actually, here's how I really want things to be. And if you really are doing 1099 properly, everyone works for themselves, and really functionally what you have is a franchise. People are under your brand name, and functionally they are working independently, doing their own business. So the other thing is, they don't really work for you. They work under your umbrella and brand name, but that's really it. And the independent part of the independent contractor thing means that there's not really an incentive for them to stay. And turnover-wise, you're going to run a greater risk with the independent contractor thing, because it's like, well, I'm really doing this myself. Maybe you're kind of giving me some grace and have some systems in place that are convenient, but kind of as soon as I figure out what I'm going to do, I'm going to bounce because I'm independent. The other thing is, you don't really get to create the same culture in a 1099 model you can as a W-2, because again, we're kind of all sort of collectively doing a group project like we would in grad school, but nobody's really in charge. So part of what we get is like, hey, W-2 is expensive. This just has to do with getting your numbers and pay metals understood right. They're really not more expensive. If anything, they're probably a little more affordable over the long term, because you get flexibility around pay structures and things like that you can't do as a 1099. Too complicated, that's a front-end thing. And we'll talk about that, to where the too complicated part's the setup. But once everything's up and running, it's up and running, and you just tweak it and maintain it and keep it going. The idea that it's not what therapists want isn't true. So as somebody that's now been through a hurricane, have had people do maternity leave, do these other things, people want the support. That's really what they want. They really don't want to run a business. And going back to like when I was in Next Level Practice as a community member, the reframe for me with group practice was, you have a business, it works like a vehicle. Not everyone wants to be an owner operator of their own vehicle. And this is who you want in your practice at the end of the day. So there's some big real consequences, and I'm trying not to terrify people in the room that maybe have 1099s, but there are some massive, massive penalties if you get in trouble for misclassifying employees or as 1099s and trying to do that. And again, it takes a lot more work to establish somebody as a 1099 on an ongoing basis, with proving they're running things, proving you're not paying like Psychology Today profiles, proving these other things, and establishing their independence you do on an ongoing basis. Whereas, like as employees, you kind of just do this and get control of things. So you can... We've had colleagues in our area challenge owners of businesses under 1099 model for misclassification. I've done that in the past. I was in California working event stuff, was clearly an employee, got disgruntled because of how I was being treated, because I had a really terrible boss. And so I had $6,000 worth of back taxes paid for less than 6 months of work because I said, this is wrong. And they took care of it. No lawsuit. They just made it right. That was it. IRS penalties, you're going to have to pay back taxes and things like that, plus interest and everything else, potentially some fines. Plus, it like disrupts your reputation, most of how we are successful doing this, group practice or solo, is our human capital and investment about this is who I am, I'm good at what I do, I'm known for caring for my people, both my clients and my employees and people that work with me. And those relationships are priceless. And once those get tarnished, it's really hard to repair them if you can. So what if W2s actually made your life easier? So how many of you know how you want your notes done, right? How many of you know kind of the culture you want, the environment that you want to work in and the people in it, right? How many of you know which EHR you want? Speaking of systems, these are like two great really intro things to talk about. We all have a vision of what we want the work environment to be, and the structure really lets things get clear. And with 1099, you can kind of sort of say, hey, well, I might do it this way or I might do these other things, whereas with W2, you actually get to say, here's our playbook, here's where we're going to do it, here's the employee relations, and all those other things. So differences in how W2s versus like 1099s kind of play out. So employee status, we withhold taxes if we're W2, which is, again, it sounds scary. We'll get to like the setup and who you need to kind of help set this up later on and kind of demystify it. Benefits can be really anything from like, hey, here's $15 a month towards CEU tuition, whatever you want to pay, those kind of things, all the way up to health insurance and other things like that. And then work structure is, I know it says employee control or employer control, but really we're directors. One of the shifts for me was talking to an HR consultant about 1.5 years ago about why not W2. And I was like, well, I don't really want to like manage people that way. And she's like, you don't have to change your management style, which I'm going to bookmark and we can come back to because it does change too. But the idea of like micromanaging a boss or micromanaging other people and saying, this is how you should do things. I'm very independent, empowerment oriented. So I'm like, if your baseline for humaning is here and you have a graduate degree and then medical licenses, your bar is kind of a little higher in terms of my perspective, just because you've done the work and shown you're capable of it. And that still doesn't mean you don't need some guidance on how to then employ it and put it into practice, which is why being a mentor as a boss and leading things out, the W2 model works better. Basically, as an independent contractor, you can kind of see everything is on them. So really, at some point, why do they need you, right? So some other things with this. No, I got the right button figured out. So cost-wise, short term, it's much easier to start 1099. It's like, hey, you could literally write on a napkin, I'll pay you $50 a session. You clock the hours, send me an invoice, and you're done, right? It can be that simple and straightforward. But long term, like, again, why am I really here? Because the relationship's much looser by design. Turnover risk much higher, right? W2s, again, people really want to have the structure to then do what they're really there to do, which is to be a functional be a functional, happy human, hopefully, and then also be a really good therapist. And training investment, W2, it's going to be more because long-term you have more systems in place because you've provided the structure to allow them not to freak out. And then at the end of it, like, you are at really big risk, 1099, especially after rule changes last year. And we'll kind of talk about some of those, about what's weighted differently and why those matter. But in essence, this is kind of it. Long term, too, like, how much does it take you to train an employee? How long do y'all spend? How many spend 3 months onboarding? How many spend 6 months onboarding before you really feel like they know everything's going on? So about 6 months in, you can turn them loose and they're good to go, right? So how much of your time as a business owner, how much of your investment in terms of paying other people to help train them for that, that's a big investment, right? So if somebody comes in for 3 months and bails, you've trained them up on how to go do their own thing on their own. So long-term wise, you're much better off. Finding data in our field is really difficult. I just want to acknowledge, because we don't report data because we don't have time. We're busy business owners. So this was just something to say roughly about 42 to 45% of the model right now is a W-2 only. I have one contractor. She works full-time. She remains contract for other people. Her passion population's working with people in incarceration and navigating in and out of that transition. And so if I ever really needed to say this is why this person's specifically still 1099, she's always worked a full-time job somewhere else with me and been kind of, I'm her side hustle. And she works with a really specific population. If she has bandwidth, she takes on other clients. But outside of that, everybody else is W-2, whether it's part-time, full-time, it doesn't matter.
Something always comes up when you're running a private practice? Well, Gusto's payroll and HR services can make it a little easier. Gusto was designed for you, the small business owner. They take the pain out of running a business, automatically calculating paychecks, filing payroll taxes, setting up open enrollment. Gusto does it all. Want more? Time tracking, health insurance, 401k, onboarding, commuter benefits, offer letters, access to HR experts. You get the idea. With Gusto, you can focus on the joy of running your private practice. It's super easy to set up and get started, and if you're moving from another provider, Gusto can transfer all your data for you. Here's the best part. Because you're a listener, you get 3 months totally free. All you have to do is go to gusto.com/Joe. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. I'm telling you, you're going to love Gusto. Get started today.
So what do you need? So it's not, you can't do it yourself. Like, I have this HR certification. I took a test. I'm not an HR person, meaning I don't have years of experience working in HR in the corporate sense. But HR right now is going to be built into your payroll systems, which are going to need any way to pay people. So Gusto, ADP, although I think most people shifted off of ADP because there was some big thing that happened a couple years ago, but Gusto and lots of other companies like that do payroll, do what's called fractional HR. And so part of the big setup challenge with W2 and getting it rolling, and I'm going through this now that I'm adding in AFLAC benefits and other things, is how do I get benefits I'm going to provide deducted off my payroll? And so working with someone that's doing payroll for me now that just recently got outsourced, we're kind of ironing kinks out. But I have people that are in place that this is what they do for a living, which is set up payroll, manage HR specifics, do things like the I-9 hiring paperwork and verify you're allowed to work in the company or country and other things. All that's really there. And so HR and payroll are kind of these two units that are kind of linked up. Either way, if you're a 1099 practice or a W-2 practice, you need to have at least one attorney involved that can navigate you through employment law. And you need somebody state-specific, just because each state's going to be very different. The requirements for doing HR or any payroll or any other status kind of thing in California, Illinois, Michigan, Colorado, they're all going to be very different than my state of North Carolina, which is kind of a free-for-all. So you're always going to need an employment attorney. I'm actually meeting with kind of my group owner friends, collective attorney next week. We've all kind of shared paperwork, but it's time I actually start that relationship with them now that I'm really building in employee handbook and structure and other things like that. So you have a team of professional people. This is my one graphic I was really not super happy with AI, but this is what we end up with. So you as a practice owner, you're kind of the center point of things. And the more I've done this and more I've grown, you really are the center point of that web and everything interconnects. And if you have ever done couples or family, you realize every time you add a person, your relationships kind of grow exponentially. And at some point you reach a size to where you can't be 90% of the entire system and process. And so again, you have lots of help for this. They're professionals. These are going to be your accountants, your bookkeepers, your payroll, your companies, your employment attorneys and things like that. So all of that's there. It's accessible. And again, most of this is going to be on the front end for W2. Once it's up and running, everyone I know that's done this for years has reassured me kind of it just keeps going. And maybe you hit a kink and you tweak it, but you're going to have a kink and have to tweak it no matter what. So what you end up doing is you get to create the culture. We have weekly team meetings on Fridays. That's when my team kind of decided to do that. It's going to be interesting to see how much bandwidth for that I still have down the road as we grow, but that's what we have. We do a monthly supervision thing. I call it an outside supervisor that's a friend of mine. We have a whole clinical consultation group that usually runs about 90 minutes. Everybody's kind of on the same page about values, and this is what we get to create. What you end up gaining is the stability because you know your team's invested in you the same way you are in them. You get control, meaning to some degree, but really it's more about guidance and giving them structure, kind of like the previous speaker said. I really like the structure builds in accountability, which then leads to empowerment. And that control piece too is like people want stuff spelled out. And if you don't spell it out, and this is that kind of difference in management style things, employees will want everything spelled out, like A is for apples, B is for bananas, in the whole thing. And then you go through the spelling of the words. So just know ahead of time, if you haven't done this, that you are going to have a learning curve from a management perspective to have a little more direction because that's actually what people want. And once it's done and once you have the policies laid out, again, everything kind of cruises along. So more front-end setup. Retention, when you have people that are like, hey, I get health insurance or dental or these other things through your company, greater retention. Also, I can see the investment you're putting in me because my work comes back in the form of CE credits, benefits, these other things. And then the peace of mind of like, the IRS isn't going to come knocking on my door and say, here's 5 years of however much penalty and back taxes from some disgruntled employee that filled the form out on the IRS site and then got you in trouble. So risk indicators, the more you kind of offer people as 1099s, the more at risk you kind of end up. There's ways you can kind of work around this to kind of say, hey, well, I'm offering the EMR, but my 1099 contractor is paying for their seat and doing these other things. But you basically have to set everybody up as vendors. And then you're constantly doing this back and forth accounting about, well, they paid rent for the office and paid for these other things, and I can't really do it. And it just ends up being an administrative burden after a while to not do the W-2 thing for what you already want, which is consistency across your entire platform and practice. You can do the supervised documentation, some other things like that. If you are a 1099 person, do not pay for psychology today. That is a huge red flag, so please be aware. So just a quick little thing. How much are they doing? Yes, it's a W-2. I still don't control schedules. People set their own thing, but if I really needed to, I could. It's not something I want to do as a boss. It's just not my style. Really, like the big thing on the bottom, do you really want them to know if you want to give direction on how they do the work? And then the other thing is if it's an ongoing project, if it's ongoing, meaning no end in sight, they're definitely a W-2. So basically things you can do now, check with your payroll company, do an audit just like the previous speaker said, and just say, hey, like, am I good? Sit down with an employment attorney. Even if you just sit down for a consult and go spend an hour there, it'll let you know where you need to maybe like realign if needed. Final thought is like, this is really how this is going to work in the future. The other, I guess, big takeaway too from this last point is if your primary goal, like primary business is plumbing and you have plumbers, they're W-2s because it's the purpose of your business. So if your purpose of your business is therapy and you have therapists, they're W-2s because it's kind of the number one reason you're in business. So what can you do? I mean, obviously, like I'm one of the consultants, so plug practice the practice. We have lots of resources for all this. Be happy to work with you as a group or one-on-one. Like I said previously, there's a ton of other resources you can kind of find out in terms of other people to talk to. But that's kind of my spiel, my W-2 pitch. You can get a hold of us here. And if you have any questions, please reach out. Yes?
I have a comment and a question.
Yes.
I was really smart. Thank you. My question is, for those of us, when we talk about controlling their schedule, I never control anyone's schedule. However, primarily we are an in-person practice, brick and mortar, which means people have room reservations. And they need to ask permission if they want to try to come in at a time that's not in their room reservation. So in a sense, we do control schedules, right? And I just wonder, from your opinion, do you consider, and do you think the IRS would consider having people have room reservation times as controlling their schedule for the purpose of an IRS audit?
You could very easily make a case that it's resource management. So I have 10 rooms available and 15 clinicians, and there's only so many hours in the day and we can't share. And you could try to argue it that way. I really don't know what the IRS would decide to do with it, but philosophically you could make that argument there. It would be how I would probably approach it. So one more and I think I'm out of time. I think they're going to run me off stage. So.
Hi.
Yes.
Is there a formula out there for figuring out how much a W-2 employee will cost the business?
There are. That's a tough question because everybody's got different models and different things. And so like Asheville's a really tight area. So what it costs the business and our margins are going to be different than maybe what other places could do, especially if you're an insurance-based practice versus private pay. Really, at the end of the day, it's just being comfortable getting to know your numbers and kind of look to say, hey, roughly it's going to be this versus that. In short, just to do a super quick summary, having done the 1099 and W-2, your 1099 percentage, let's say it's 60%, you need to factor in 7.6% for the employee side, like income tax related things, about 1% for unemployment, probably about 1.5% for workers' comp insurance, and then they're going to be on your malpractice, so roughly 10%. So if 60% is your like good spot as a 1099 in your market, figure 50% is going to go to them, and then about 10% of that is stuff that doesn't make it to their paycheck, but you pay on their behalf. Cool. Well, thank y'all. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for hanging out with us and listening to our speakers from the Group Practice Conference 2025. We are so excited to have you join us there. Make sure you put on your calendars Black Friday. That's when tickets open up. We want to make sure that you grab that ticket right away. We are so excited to be hosting this here in Traverse City. And, we couldn't do this show without our amazing sponsors like Gusto. Gusto, as a small business owner for me, paying and taking care of the team and getting, the benefits and taxes and all of that stuff is just really hard to figure out sometimes. So Gusto makes it way easier. And right now, our listeners are getting 3 months totally free. Just head on over to gusto.com/Joe. It's where we run our payroll. Again, that's gusto.com/Joe. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music. And this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.